Okay, welcome everybody back from your break or from the previous panel. My name is Hannah Johnson. I'm the publisher of international trade magazine Publishing Perspectives. We operate under the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I would like to thank the Abu Dhabi Arabic Language Center for inviting all of us to talk about this important topic. And I would also like to thank my panelists for joining me and taking the time to think about their answers and to prepare what I think is going to be a great discussion today. So we are going to talk about the challenges of selling Arabic rights abroad, of how we can export more Arabic literature to the rest of the world. And I have on stage 4 people who are working in different areas of this particular field. So what I will do is ask each of you to introduce yourselves and to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in this field. I will start with Saeed Al-Tuneji, who is the acting executive director of the Arabic Language Center. Saeed, can you tell us a little bit about the Arabic Language Center's activities in publishing and specifically about the Kalima project, which I know is very important to you as well?
Thank you, Helen. بالنسبة لمركز أبو ظبي للغة العربية يعد هذا المؤتمر الذي نحن فيه اليوم واحد من أهم وأحدث مشاريع النشر والصناعة المحتوى. طبعا غدا سيكون معرض أبو ظبي للكتاب. هناك أيضا إدارات متخصصة في مركز أبو ظبي للغة العربية بصناعة المحتوى والنشر، إدارة متخصصة بالمحتوى الابتكاري بالتقنيات، بالمحتوى والنشر، إدارة أخرى أيضا بالتعليم وصناعة النشر في هذا الجانب. يمكن يكون واحد من أهم المشاريع اللي يتبناها حقيقة ويدعمها مركز أبو ظبي للغة العربية هو مشروع كلمة للترجمة. هذا الحقيقة المشروع الذي يحتفي خلال هذا العام بمرور 15 سنة على تأسيسه. 15 سنة على تأسيسه، لكن لو نرجع في البدايات أعتقد 2007 ونرى مدى الطموح الذي كان بداية هذا المشروع ومدى التحديات التي واجهت هذا المشروع، أعتقد أنا ممكن نتكلم عنه لاحقا في هذا الجانب.
Okay. Thank you, Saeed. Next, we have Rwanda Bas, who is just recently changed your role, but you are currently working with the International Federation of the Photographic Industry, looking after the music sector. And previously, you were with the Emirates Publishers Association, working on the Emirates Reproductive Rights Management Association, which is quite an achievement. Can you talk a little bit about the establishment of the ERRA and also your new role now at the IFPI?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. The Emirates Reproduction Rights Management Association is actually a product of years and years of trying to develop a collective management organization in the UAE, or in Arabic what we call الإدارة الجماعية, which was actually something that the UAE copyright law was one of the first countries that had actually, Arab countries, that had actually provided for allowing the collective management activity of copyright. I joined EPA in 2014, and there was already Her Excellency Sheikh Abdul Al-Qasimi, that she was the leader on this topic, and since she established the Emirates Publishers Association, has set it as one of the objectives for the publishing industry. But as we've seen from the panels throughout the day, today, the ecosystem for me was the key word, and it was having the Emirates Publishers Association, as well as Her Excellency Sheikh Abdul pushing for the project, as well as collaborations with various ministries and the ability to finally enforce this, which was, for me at least since I joined, 7 years of learning process, negotiation, awareness, from our side at the association, as well as the ministry side. And finally, just a few months ago, we launched, and we now have the first collective management organization actually in the Gulf, that's for sure, and in the Arab world that is not a product of a Western subsidiary. I know that in France and in other countries they have some management organizations, but that pertain to originally French ones. After that, I moved on to do the same for the music industry. I left it in the hands of my ex-colleagues. It's in very good hands, but also it's a new concept, so we're constantly still working together. I haven't left my project by itself. It's in good hands between in Sharjah always. And I've moved on to IFPI, which I also cannot still say the full name, but with a view of doing the same for the music industry, because at the end of the day, as we've seen today, content is changing, and the way we consume creative content is so interconnected that you cannot have some parts of IP protected and the others left alone. So for me, it was a natural continuation of what I've been doing.
And I think we'll get into why copyright is so important for supporting not only the local ecosystem, but also the export of Arabic literature in a minute. But I'll move on to Jürgen Boos. He is the CEO and director of the Frankfurt Book Fair. And Jürgen, you have been a supporter of the Abu Dhabi Book Fair for a very long time, and you're on the scientific committee of the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. Can you just talk a little bit about your ongoing cooperation with the Abu Dhabi Book Fair and also your support for the Arabic publishing industry?
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Arabic Language Center, for having me here tonight. I'm in the business of bringing book people together. So since 2007, it seemed logical when I came here for the first time and I experienced the passion for books, for reading. It seemed to be my destiny to bring people together here in Abu Dhabi as well. And we've been working on this now for 15 years and working on the book fair, but also working on the professional side of our industry, like training people, supporting such conferences, do a lot of things, discuss copyright protection, what we learned before. All aspects of our business are important to this, but most important to me are always the people behind the books. It's the authors, it's the storytellers, it's everybody involved in the process. Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether a book is printed or not. So I think also a song or a film can tell a story, but everything goes back to the original content, which is mostly a story somebody's telling.
And last we have Persa Kumutsi, who is a writer and translator of Arabic literature, and you also are the co-founder and director of the Center of Greek and Arabic Literature and Culture. Can you tell us why you founded this center and what your goals are for it?
Thank you, Han. First, permit me to address in Arabic to honor this beautiful language and the country that has invited us to this wonderful event. فأنا أشكر المنظمين على دعوتكم الكريمة وأهنئكم من صميم قلبي على التنظيم الرائع والمهم جدا، وأحيي طبعا زملائي الكرام والمتميزين الذين يشاركون في هذا الجدول، وكذلك المنصغين وجميع المشاركين. فأنا فخورة أكون من ضمنهم أو من ضمنكم. موضوعنا اليوم تصدير الأدب العربي إلى الخارج، فيعتبر الأدب من أهم جسور الاتصال والحوار بين الثقافات لأنه حتى عندما يعبر عن خصوصيات مجتمع ما فإن المفاهيم التي يروج لها عالمية، فغرض الأدب الأساسي هو الإنسان نفسه مع القضايا الأساسية التي تهمه. وعلى حد تعبير أرسطو لا يقتصر الأدب على تقليد حياة ومجتمع ما ولا يعكس ماضيه أو حاضره فحسب، بل إنه يوضح البعد الكوني للإنسان في كل مكان. Was a very short introduction. I will identify myself as أولاً وأخيراً مترجمة للأدب العربي for 32 years now. Very proud of this part of myself. I'm also a writer, but my writing has to do with the double identity and two cultures, the Arabic and the Greek culture, as I was born in an Arabic country, so I feel partly an Arab, and all my life I honored these two cultures. From that passion of mine for the last many, many years came the idea 3 years ago to create, it's an initiative actually, it's a very small step towards تعزيز الثقافات، تعزيز الثقافة اليونانية والعربية، وهي من أقدم الثقافات في العالم. فهذا هذه المبادرة الصغيرة التي بدأت منذ 3 سنوات أثرت الكثير في التفكير عن الأدب العربي في اليونان، وأثرت حتى في أن القراء عرفوا الكثير من الأدباء الذي جاءوا وتكلموا عن عملهم. So it's an initiative that aims at the intercultural dialogue, and we hope that we have the strength to continue and to expand it, to grow it. It's very small.
Well, every step is important, and I think all of us know here that it takes a lot of small steps to reach something larger.
Exactly.
So before to kick off the conversation, I earlier this year, just a quick anecdote, I was talking to my friends at Bhanipal magazine, and they were telling me something that I've heard from many people, especially from the Arab world, which is that despite the fact that it always seems like there's more and more interest from international publishers in translating Arabic, there are still so many untranslated authors. I mean, as an international publisher, you have your pick from classics all the way up to modern masterpieces and emerging voices. And I think that's why we are here, to address how we can encourage more connections and more interaction. And because of the broad range of projects that we have on this panel, I think in preparing for this panel, we had discussed that actually what we're doing here is creating the right ecosystem, as Rowan said earlier, for exporting Arabic literature. So it's not just about getting the rights sold, but about creating a robust industry in the Arab world that can support itself and therefore also connect more effectively with the rest of the world. So I think, Rowan, I would start with you talking about what the ERRA is accomplishing and why it is so important that copyright is protected in the Arab world, and whether you see this potentially spreading to other countries besides the UAE.
Oh, it's a very important place to start, actually, because, you know, like anything else that has value, you need a good foundation, right? And for any product to be able to travel, whether it's a creative product or a tangible one, there needs to be a process that allows it to move. And projects like ERA is a product of first of all, the UAE signing international treaties, which is, on a policy level, that's part of the ecosystem. The second part is the ministries and the associations that represent the interests of the right holders to work together to create a process whereby right holders can enforce their rights and thereby protect them. And that was, the era was basically a product of that for many, many, many years. And by having that, okay, let's take one step back. So as a creator, you own copyright. Copyright gives you the exclusive right to decide how you want to sell your product, how you want it to be used, and that exclusive right means it's only for you. And any other way that that product or that creation is used needs to be paid for. Now, it's not an unknown fact that piracy, for instance, is a huge issue in our region, and that has, unfortunately, at least in the sector of books, devalued the product of books, because people want an easy way to access it. You'd be surprised to find that even even in countries like in the Gulf, where they're not as poor or they don't have such a poor there isn't as much poverty as, for example, in countries like Egypt or Jordan or Lebanon. People still pirate because it's easier to access. They take a book, they photocopy it. My friend copies 3 books instead of me going all the way to Magrudy's and buying it. Why? I can just copy it. Teachers do the same at universities. Professors do the same. And the idea of ERA is not a center to police copyright or to police piracy. I think the main thing is to allow legal access, and that's something we always try to use when we were lobbying for that project with governments. Is we're not here to police, we're here to provide legal access at a decent cost and educate people on the value of copyright. And once you have that, you attract people not just to invest in books from abroad, but also the next generation to invest in a career in publishing, in a career in writing, because they know that their rights are safeguarded. They know that that it's a profitable job, and I think it's a milestone for the United Arab Emirates. So I congratulate the country for making this happen. I take a lot of pride in being part of that project, but it's been a long way coming, and I think that will change the dynamics of the industry hugely. And it's creating value.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk about easy access to copyright protected content, that actually translates very well into Saeed, what you're doing at Kalima, bringing other books into Arabic in order to make access easier and also to connect the Arab publishing world to the international publishing world. But I'm sure this isn't an easy project. Can you talk about the dynamics of this and some of the challenges and how you are overcoming these challenges?
Yes. يمكن هذه واحدة من أهم التحديات اللي تحدثت عنها، هي قصة القرصنة وأيضا الحقوق النشر، ولكن أعتقد أن هناك تحديات أيضا مهمة وكبيرة. مشروع كلمة للترجمة عندما انطلق في 2007 كان حقيقة وما يزال مشروع طموح وعنده كثير حقيقة من الآمال، ومن البداية كانت رسالته قوية واضحة أنه هو جسر، هذا الجسر بما يحمل من معنى جسر للثقافة، جسر للترجمة، لدعم الكتاب والترجمة إلى اللغة العربية. فكان هدف أساسي له بالنسبة لمشروع كلمة. لكن المشروع واجه التحديات التي كانت في تلك المرحلة، أولها القرصنة، قصة القرصنة، قصة اليوم الحقوق. حتى لما كانت كلمة تخاطب الناشرين العالميين أن نترجم إلى اللغة العربية، فكانت النظرة فيها شوية أن العالم العربي يمارس القرصنة في هذا الجانب، فكانت النظرة حقيقة متدنية. لكن مشروع كلمة تغلب على هذه القصص كلها، تغلب من خلال الثقة، من خلال العقود، من خلال احترام الحقوق، من خلال الالتزام بهذه الحقوق، من خلال دعم المترجم العربي. يعني حتى المترجم العربي هذه واحدة من أكبر الإشكاليات اللي يواجهها أو تواجهها صناعة الكتاب العربي، أن المترجم مهضوم حقه في هذا الجانب. يعني يمكن في صناعة الكتاب وفي البزنس نفسه يمكن أقل الحقوق لهذا المترجم. فالمشروع لم يشتغل فقط على النشر، هو كان الهدف منه هو دعم الترجمة، دعم الناشر، دعم المؤلف، دعم هذه العلاقة في هذا الجانب. خطوات البداية كانت صعبة، لكنها كانت ثابتة وراسخة خطواتها وطموحها وآماله في هذا الجانب. مشروع كلمة يمكن يختلف عن أي مشروع آخر عربي للترجمة، أنه لم يكن يترجم من لغة واحدة، وهذا سهل. مشروع كلمة فتح على لغات العالم. يعني اليوم كلمة يترجم من 22 لغة، كلمة لم يقتصر على صنف ومجال معين، من 10 تصنيفات مختلفة، فيه العلوم، فيه الآداب، فيه الفلسفة، في غير. هذه كلها تحديات أن تجد المترجم المتمكن، وأيضا تصنع الكتاب ما عاد هو مجرد ورق موجود في كتاب، هو صناعة لها مقاييس، لها معايير، لابد أنك تلتزم في هذا الجانب. فهذا ما حرصت عليه كلمة من البداية، حرصت أن يكون الكتاب العربي له هذه القوة، له هذا الحجم، له أيضا هذه المكانة العالمية. فأعتقد بعد 15 سنة من هذه التجربة، من هذا العطاء، اليوم هذا المشروع له حقيقة تقديره، سواء على المستوى الناشر العالمي وأيضا مستوى الجمهور العربي الذي يطلب هذه الكتب. فيعني كان يحتاج إلى هذا الصبر وإلى هذا المجال، لكن هذه التحديات أعتقد أنها تواجه العديد من دور النشر العربية في هذا الجانب.
And I think this discussion about the number of translators and finding qualified translators leads us very nicely to Parsa, who is herself a translator and has translated a lot of books. So first I'll just ask you, are there enough translators of Arabic into other languages in the world, do you think?
I think we have not many, but we have good translators in Europe and in the States. I don't know about the other countries. And especially in European countries where there are مراكز للثقافة. For example, we don't have such a markaz in Athens. I'm confusing the languages, sorry. So the efforts are individual. But in France, in Germany, in Spain, in Italy, where there are very good departments at the university, academic departments, they produce very good translators. And of course now with the interactions and internet, people get together, the exchange of students and people travel. They can live in Arabic countries much more easier now than before 20 or 30 years. So there are good translators. Not many, but there's a good amount of translators. The problem is with smaller countries in Europe where we don't have دراسات منهجية, academic. So this is more difficult. Countries like Greece, but still we are trying through the small initiatives we create to make people aware, to study the language, and more people study Arabic language now, especially during the last years where Greece has received a lot of refugees from the area. So there's people who are turning to language and translation. And we aspire through the center later on, if we can do it, create a beginning, a small course, a starting course for translation from Arabic to English, Greek and Greek into Arabic, and I myself will try to help in doing this before I'm too old.
Do you, beyond the role of actually translating a book, translators play a very important role in helping publishers in their markets identify literature to translate. Is that something that you do, and is it something that publishers in Greece are receptive to?
I used to do it until before the economical crisis that hit Greece and the first decade of the 20th century, which came very hard to us to face. So the book market was faced a lot of trouble concerning translated books, and of course Arabic books were among the books, the languages that were having this problem of recognition and visibility. So the publishers did not listen to translators anymore as much to
Literary
agents,
yes.
because they thought that they would know better about the commercial success of a book. But this is not always so, because Arabic language is a very special language and very few people know the background of it. So al-Wukala would suggest only the books that are have prizes or are very known, and these are usually باهظة الثمن, very expensive. Royalties are very expensive. So there's a vicious cycle. Now the publishers are going back to translators, or are going back to the source of suggestions.
Sure. But I mean, also prizes do play a role in building visibility, not only for publishers, but also for the public. Jürgen, since you're part of the Sheikh Zayed Book Award, can you talk a little bit about the role of book prizes, and specifically the Sheikh Zayed Book Award, in helping to raise visibility for Arabic literature?
Yeah, as I mentioned, my two predecessors, you spoke about the next generation, you spoke about visibility, and visibility does account for authors, so an award is very, very important, especially if you have very few awards in the Arabic culture focusing on literature. So it was a big, big step to establish the Sheikh Zayed Award, and having several categories, especially the one for young authors, which I think is so important, and for translators, it is so important. But since you mentioned the next generation, the young author thing is very close to my heart. And also, when I'm saying it's always about making people visibility in our industry, in the book business, I think we do need to send more young people around on all levels. Bring these young authors to other countries, let them speak on other literature festivals, work with the young translators, invite young people to these conferences here. It's a wonderful step to have this conference, but I think the average age is still a little bit high. I think we need more young people, and I think when I think of these fellowship programs, book fairs do have worldwide. Yeah, I see very few applications from the Arab world. So I think we need to encourage young professionals to be international, to travel, which brings me back to the award, so we can make it visible how important our industry is and what the cultural sector really does mean, especially when we are living in crazy times. And I think these times wouldn't be so crazy if we would listen a lot more to other voices. And therefore we need books, we need storytellers, and we need translations. And book fairs, and book awards.
So if there are any publishers in the audience who want to apply for a fellowship, Jürgen is encouraging you to do this. We have time for a few questions. There are a couple of questions here that seem to relate to sort of the same thing. One of them is about how can you know what the best-selling books in Arabic are? Are there sources? And there's another one asking, who is the Arabic Murakami, or how might we identify the big literary figures in the Arab world? Do any of you want to jump in with, perhaps on the bestseller side, are there sources of Arabic bestsellers that you can point people to?
From my perspective, as having been a publisher for many, many years, it's about the professionalization of the publishers, yeah? Mm-hmm. If you train the editors, they will find a way to identify these titles which are going to sell. So it's about professional editors, send these editors around to other places, although in the Arab world. It's the translators again, listen to salespeople, see what's happening in the literary scene, go to book festivals, just be part of a community. And then you'll understand what is important and how to produce. Bestsellers can't be produced.
أنا أتفق حقيقة مع أستاذ بوز في هذه الجزئية. يعني البست سيلر هي يعني ممكن تكون الأقوى والأهم هو الموضوع المطروح، هو الكاتب الذي نذهب له. أما أني أتبع في وسائط الاجتماع أن هذا هو أفضل كتاب أو غيره، أعتقد أن هذا غير مقنع أو غير صحيح أو غير دقيق. الكتاب الجيد حسب اهتمامك، حسب هوايك. هناك كتاب كبار، هناك كتاب متميزون، وهناك أيضا كتب لها أثر في الإنسان. فيا بد أنك في النهاية تتبع حسك وتطلع على هذه المعارض، على هذه الدول المتخصصة، تقرأ أكثر عن هذه الكتب. ولكن أنا أقول لك هذه وجبة وهذه أفضل كتب هي أكثر مبيعا وغيره، لا أعتقد أن هذه غير دقيقة وغير صحيحة في هذا الجانب.
It's here. Okay, I know. I just wanted to add something on this, just from a different angle. I remember some time ago Googling to see what are the top-selling Arabic books to find, and there are no sources, and that's because there is no data. We still lack, unfortunately, credibility in the industry, and to take it back to the next generations, they don't see it as a profitable industry to go into, and that needs to change. I mean, I look at photos from book fairs in Frankfurt or Latin America, and the amount of children that line up and the book, it's a different sensation, and this is what we need to bring here by changing the whole ecosystem, even with boring stuff like metadata, which sounds so boring but so important. How do they find out what are the bestsellers? Like Jürgen was saying, encouraging younger people to go into the book industry, not it being a taboo because it's not going into medicine or law or it's an important industry to invest in, and I think we need to reposition that in the Arab world, and there's no better place to do it than in the UAE, to be honest. So.
Well, I think that also brings us back to the point about building the entire infrastructure of publishing in order to help books get exported. If there's data and information about bestsellers, that makes it a little bit, that's one more step that, or one more resource that international publishers can look at. Any authors that stand out as big name authors, the next Arabic Murakami equivalent that any of you want to highlight in a room full of publishers right now?
I would like to say here, sorry, can I?
Yes, please.
Because I read a lot of Arabic literature because of my work, first as a translator, but also to know people and invite them to the center and speak for the work and let themselves known to the Greek public. And by the way, all our فعاليات are in 2 languages, Arabic and English, مع ترجمة موازية. So the 2 languages are heard. Arabic is heard. Arabic needs to be heard in Europe more. It's not heard at all. So this is also very important. I believe I read a lot. Arabic literature, I can say that with full conscience, it's one of the greatest because it combines a lot of elements. When we speak of Arabic literature, it's not only ثقافة واحدة, it's 22 دولة, okay? Each has his own background, historical background, تراث, ثقافة, تاريخ, تحولات اجتماعية كثيرة. it's such a rich literature. So I cannot pick 1 or 2 or 10, not even the ones who take the prizes. There are, it is an immense power of writing, young writing in the Arab world. I wish I had 3 lives to be able to read.
Your enthusiasm for it sounds so familiar,
yes.
because I think people who know so much about Arabic literature feel the same, and they really want to see more of it available to other people. Saeed, you have something else to add?
أعتقد هناك الحقيقة العديد من الكتاب المهمين الذين لا بد أن يقرأ لهم القارئ العربي أو القارئ العالمي. حاليا اليوم هناك معايير، يعني هناك الفائزون مثلا بجائزة الشيخ زايد الكتاب، في أسماء عربية مهمة، جائزة البوكر في أسماء مهمة لا بد أن تقرأ لهم. لكن في التاريخ عندنا في مختلف الفنون والآداب وغيرها هناك كثير من الأسماء على مر المراحل والتاريخ لا بد أن نقرأ لهم، وكتاباتهم وموضوعاتهم مهمة حقيقة للقارئ.
They are, and certainly events like this one, events like the Frankfurt Book Fair, like the Abu Dhabi Book Fair, and ongoing professional events make it easier for us to connect to each other. We are out of time, unfortunately, and there are still questions on here, and I encourage you to follow up with our panelists if you have questions. But thank you for your attention. Thank you to our panelists here for their enthusiasm for this topic, and also for all of the work that they're putting in to build the industry and build connections, and let's be optimistic that there will be results coming soon. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Hannah, to our speakers also. There was a beautiful, really amazing panel. You have changed my perception. I usually read English books, and now I feel the privilege that I'm able to read Arabic, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to take some recommendation, some books from your side also. So thank you once again for a great panel, and we truly hope that the non-Arabs could speak and read Arabic in the near future all around the world. Thank you so much, and well done.